This is the continuation of the lecture for Introduction to GIS on manipulating feature classes. Today we are going to work on defining and populating a feature class from scratch. We have to do a little bit of setup, so the first thing that we have to do is, as usual, just like with tables and other things, we start our process in Catalog. In essence, what we're doing is making a new file that we will define and then in Catalog, and then copy it over to Map and populate the information in Map. It's the same process as we did with a table, except in addition to inputting data the way that we've done with a table, we have to also input the geography, the location of where these, in this case polygon, although of course as always you can do this with lines and points as well. So we're going to start the process by getting into Catalog. We're going to move into our safe spot, wherever you have decided your safe place to be. I'm going to open up that file and then move into my practice. In this case, you would move into your assignment folder that you've created. Again, although you don't have to, the computer tends to work better if you create a new personal geodatabase. If you already have one, that's fine, you can try it, but if for some reason things are not working, you feel like you're doing the correct steps, but it's still not working, try making a new personal geodatabase. It seems redundant, but sometimes it just works better in a clean one. So here I've created a new one, Create Feature Class. If you need a refresher on how to create a personal geodatabase, remember you go to your file, right-click, New, Personal Geodatabase, and then give it a name. Since we already have one, I'm going to, on my new PGD, right-click, New, and in this case we've usually made a table, but now we're going to make a feature class. Again, it's a very similar process. We're going to give it a name. We're going to call this Beetles, just because that's what the names that I plan to use. So you give it a name. You also need to identify what type of feature class it's going to be. Are you going to make a polygon, a line, a point? You choose. We're going to make polygons just to start with here. You next through the dialog box. Now at this instant, you need to be able to identify what projection your new feature class is going to be created in. This projection needs to match the projection of what you plan to put it over. So for example, here within the United States, I want my new feature class to sit on top of that accurately. So I needed to know what this projection is. Remember, an easy way to find this is to, in Map, you go right-click on your feature class down to Properties. In your Source tab here, it gives you the projection right here. So this is what we're going to need to remember. So back in Catalog, I need to find that projection. So it is a geographic coordinate system. Remember, there are two major categories here, projected and geographic. We're going to open up geographic, move down to North America because that's where this one is. Scroll down until we find the NAD, the North American 1983. And that's what we have. It's a match for us down here. So once we find it, we select it, and again, next. This allows you to do some tweaking. We are not going to bother with that. It's going to be close enough for us. The next box allows us to enter the fields that we want to have. So I'll make a field called Name. If you plan to add numbers, you can do that by changing it here. We're going to leave everything at text. And then I'll just give it some additional field names here. And I'm just making random things, but this was where you would identify what you want in your database. And then we finish. So now we have our new feature class that's listed. Remember, we're still in Catalog. All we've done is define it. So I'm going to go ahead and click and drag this over to Map, right? I have both Catalog and Map open. From Catalog, I press down and hold and then drag it over to Map. So I'm done with Catalog at this point. I'm going to close it just to get it out of our way. If I right-click into my new feature class and open it up, you can see it's there, right? Here's my favorite color, favorite pet, and then my name field here, but there's no data. And recognize it has given me a shape field because it recognizes that this is going to have geography, but now we have to identify what that geography is. So as with everything else, if we plan to alter a feature class, we have to begin editing. So get your editor toolbar if it's not already listed out of your customize toolbars, right? Your editor toolbar, and we're going to start editing. It always asks us which feature class are you going to edit, so we identify our new one, and we can now see that it's ready to be edited. I'm going to move this out of the way for a minute so that we can see. Whoops. Now, in order to edit feature classes, what we're going to do first is create the polygons themselves. So from my editor, I'm going to go ahead and close this just because we don't need it and it's in the way. From my editor toolbar, I need to have my edit tool, which is the little arrow. Now this process is really quite simple. The first thing that we need to do, however, is open up our an additional toolbar that we're going to need. So on the editor toolbar, the very last option here is Create Features. If we select that, a box opens within our screen that we're going to need. So once you select the feature class that you want to edit, again it's the only one listed here, you then have to tell the computer what type of shape you would like to make. You can make any of these. We're going to go with just a straight polygon here. Once we've done that, you can see the shape of your cursor looks a little bit different, and then you're just going to draw. Sometimes you're going to be tracing something, sometimes you're going to be doing it freehand, whatever it is. When I click and click and click, especially that third time, you can see that it automatically makes a polygon for me because I've told it that I want it to be a polygon shape. When I'm finished designing my first polygon, I double click and it recognizes it for me. Now another thing that's handy to do is to be able to make a second polygon that perfectly fits along an edge of an existing polygon. It is too difficult to do this with our human eyes. The computer is much more accurate than we are. So if we want a seamless match along a border, we have to, instead of using polygon, use autocomplete polygon. So we just switch over to that, and then the way that we do this is what's called overshoot. So I start inside the existing polygon, really kind of anywhere, from my first click, and then I click outside of that in whatever shape I choose, and then overshoot back into the existing polygon to double click. So now I have my second polygon. Now you might notice that the first one has disappeared. The only reason for that is because of my order within the table of contents. Recognize that my states is on top of my new feature class. So that means that the states is covering it up. So if I drag it down and shift it, now my new polygons are on top and we can see them. That's the only difference. Now a third way to create a new polygon is by tracing a border of a separate feature class. So let's say that I needed the border of my next polygon to fill this gap in between here, and it needed to match the border, in this case, of the states exactly. Of course, I could never perfectly match this curvy river, so again, we're going to allow the computer to do it for us. Now this requires several steps. It's outlined in your PowerPoints. I'm going to go through them here, but you might want to pull up the PowerPoints so that you can follow along. So we start out again in autocomplete polygon. We're going to toggle between being able to do a straight line segment and doing the trace option. So we're going to need to shift back and forth between these two options up here on the editor toolbar. So as with the other option, we overshoot into the existing polygon and click one time to start. Whatever shape you have out here is fine. When you get to the line that you want to trace, you'll notice that the cursor shifts a little bit. It jumps to it. You click one time onto the line that you want to trace, and notice that it's red because it has recognized that there's a border. At this point, I shift over to the trace option. I come back to my red dot here and click again to let the computer know that I'm ready to trace. And now I move my cursor along, and sometimes you have to go very slowly, again, especially if it's very curvy. You might notice that if I go too fast, see how it got lost? All you have to do is backtrack until it catches up again, and then you just move along until you're finished tracing. You click one time to let the computer know that you're finished tracing. Click back to straight line segment, and you can see it's already attached. Finish whatever other design your polygon needs. Overshoot, you can even overshoot into a separate polygon. Double click. And now we have our third. Not only do we have new shape out here, but we have a trace line here. So now we have 3 polygons. I guess we could make a fourth since there are 4 beetles. We'll go ahead and just make a fourth to make that easier. So now we have the polygons that we want, but we need to add some data. So I'll go ahead and open up the attribute table. Note I'm still editing because I'm going to need to add data here. Whoops, I did the wrong one, sorry. And you can see that now we have 4 records within our polygon because we have 4 boxes that I've made here, but the data itself is blank because I haven't edited that in yet. Let me shrink this up just so we don't need so much space. But now I can go in and begin to actually edit. Favorite color. And you just go in and add your material. And I'm sorry, it's taking a minute to type. Oh, what's the 4th? Ringo, Paul, George. Oh, George. Can't think of an animal. Sorry. Okay, so once you enter all of your data, then you stop editing. And yes, we want to save our edits. So now we have information that can be added in here. So for example, maybe I want to label each of these. First, I need to go into my new feature class and identify which of my fields should be labeled. So I move over to my label tab, and do I want it to be their name? Sure, I can leave it at that. And then say OK. And remember the labeling process that we go to. You can go ahead and label whatever you've got. You can change the font and things like that. You can also alter the color. So maybe I want to make the colors specific to it. So again, I would go into the properties box, into my symbology. Now here's an instance where I might have to do this by hand. So as opposed to having the computer be able to identify that the letters BLUE actually mean blue, the computer won't know that. So here I would just click on the in this case it's purple, and just find a blue and OK that, and then double click here again, pick on one that is orange, right? And then you would just do this by hand. Which is fine either way. Oops, that's kind of orange. But then it would match the colors that you've specified. And we'll just make that hollow. Actually, let's make it white, because then it will be solid. And then you OK that, right? So then you can just do all of the things that you would normally do within a database. So again, creating a new feature class is relatively easy. We will continue the rest of this lecture in the next video.